3 hours after the blast, the IDF spokesperson's office still hadn't released a statement, not 3 hours to confirm casualties. 3 hours before anyone started talking about what had just happened under a mountain in central Israel. I've been analyzing hypersonic warfare for years, and I can tell you exactly what 3 hours of silence means inside that building. It doesn't mean confusion. It doesn't mean they were gathering facts. It means the people who answer the phones already knew what happened, and they needed time to figure out what version of the truth they were going to tell the Israeli public. Here's what they eventually said. Very little. An incident occurred at a military facility. No further details at this time. That's it. No mention of the hypersonic glide vehicle that traveled hundreds and 400 kilometers from Iran. No mention of the fortified underground command center that was supposed to be impenetrable. No mention of the 7 senior officers killed in a single strike. The silence after this strike wasn't a cover-up. It was a recognition that something fundamental had just changed, and the people in charge didn't know how to explain it yet. Before I show you exactly what the Fattah-2 did to Israel's most protected command bunker and why no air defense system on Earth could have stopped it, hit subscribe. This is war conflict. I post forensic analysis of every major escalation, and this is the one that should terrify every military planner in the West. Let me start with what is confirmed and what is not, because transparency matters. On March 1st, 2026, Iran launched its first ever operational strike using the Fattah-2 Hypersonic glide vehicle. The target was a fortified IDF command center. The strike killed 7 senior Israeli officers and caused multiple additional casualties. Footage from Israel shows the hypersonic glide vehicle impacting the target. The trajectory and speed closely resemble Russia's Oreshnik missile used in Ukraine. The Fattah-2 is the first and only Iranian missile known to integrate a genuine hypersonic glide vehicle, distinguishing it from the older Fattah-1, which uses a maneuverable re-entry vehicle. What is analysis? The exact identities of the 7 generals, the specific command center location, and the full extent of the damage are still being assessed by open source analysts. But the strategic implications, those are clear, and they are devastating. Here's what you need to understand before we go further. This wasn't a lucky shot. This was a capability demonstration against the hardest target Iran could find, and it worked exactly as designed. Let me explain what the Fattah-2 is, because most coverage of this strike has completely failed to communicate why it matters. The Fattah-2 is not a ballistic missile, it's a hypersonic glide vehicle. The difference is everything. A traditional ballistic missile flies in a predictable arc. It launches, climbs into space, re-enters the atmosphere, and falls toward its target. You can calculate its trajectory. You can intercept it if your radar is good enough and your interceptors are fast enough. A hypersonic glide vehicle does something completely different. It launches on a rocket, separates from the booster, and then glides through the upper atmosphere at speeds between Mach 13 and Mach 15. That's 13 to 15 times the speed of sound. But speed isn't the problem. Maneuverability is the problem. The Fattah-2 doesn't follow a predictable arc. It maneuvers in both course and pitch. It changes direction. It zigzags. It can perform lateral maneuvers thousands of kilometers above the Armstrong limit, the altitude where aircraft controls stop working. Here's what that means for air defense. Radar systems track targets by predicting where they will be based on where they are and how fast they're moving. When a target can change direction at Mach 15, the math breaks. Your radar prediction is wrong the instant the missile maneuvers. Yuval Basaisky, the vice president of Rafael Advanced Defense Systems, the company that builds Israel's missile defense systems, put it bluntly in August 2025. He said, and I quote, "To intercept an object moving at Mach 10, one would need a defense moving at Mach 30, which is impossible in the atmosphere due to friction." Let me translate that for you. The man whose company builds the Arrow and David Sling systems, the best missile defense systems on Earth, just admitted that intercepting a hypersonic glide vehicle is physically impossible with current technology. He used a basketball analogy. He said, "One interceptor missile tracking one hypersonic missile is like defending LeBron James with a single player. You may keep chasing him, but you won't stop him from scoring." His proposed solution? A zone defense. Multiple interceptors covering defined areas, engaging threats as they enter. That approach would take years to implement and cost tens of billions of dollars. And even then, it might not work. Let me tell you what the Fattah-2 struck, because the target selection tells you everything about Iran's strategy. The IDF command center was not a surface building. It was a fortified underground bunker, reinforced concrete, buried deep, designed to survive direct hits from conventional ballistic missiles. The Fattah-2 didn't care. The hypersonic glide vehicle penetrated tens of meters of protective layering before detonating. The explosion that followed didn't just damage the facility, it destroyed it. 7 senior officers were killed immediately. Multiple additional casualties were reported. The identities of the 7 have not been officially released, but open-source analysts suggest they included command personnel responsible for ongoing operations against Iranian targets. This is not speculation. Footage from Israel shows the impact. The hypersonic glide vehicle appears as a blur on cameras, too fast to track, too fast to react to. Then the explosion, then smoke rising from what was supposed to be an impenetrable military installation. Here's what makes this strategically devastating. Iran didn't just prove they could hit a hardened target. They proved they could hit a hardened target that Israel believed was safe. That's the difference. Israel has spent decades and billions of dollars building underground command facilities designed to survive any attack. The assumption was that these facilities were beyond the reach of Iranian missiles. That assumption is now gone. Not degraded, not strained, gone. Every Israeli commander sitting in an underground bunker right now is looking at the ceiling and wondering if the next Fattah-2 already has their coordinates. There's a cascade happening here that most coverage is missing. Let me walk you through it. First, Iran proved they can hit a hardened underground command center. That means no Israeli military facility is safe. Not command centers, not air bases, not missile defense batteries, not the Kiryat in Tel Aviv. Second, Iran proved their targeting intelligence is good enough to find these facilities. You can't hit what you can't find. The Fattah-2 strike required real-time intelligence on the command center's location, layout, and operational status. Iran had that intelligence. Third, Iran proved they have more of these weapons. The Fattah-2 was first used on February 28th. This strike happened on March 1st. Multiple successful Fattah-2 strikes have now been documented. Fourth, Israel has no answer for this weapon, none. The vice president of Rafael, Israel's premier defense contractor, has publicly admitted that intercepting hypersonic glide vehicles is impossible with current technology. Here's the uncomfortable number I need you to sit with. Iran spent approximately $3 million on this Fattah-2 missile. The IDF command center it destroyed cost an estimated $200 to $300 million to build. The 7 generals killed represent decades of training and institutional knowledge that cannot be replaced. But that's not the number that matters. The number that matters is the cost of Israel's proposed solution. The zone defense that Yuval Baseski suggested, multiple interceptors covering defined areas, would cost tens of billions of dollars and take years to implement. Iran spent $5 million to force a multi-billion-dollar unfunded liability onto Israel's defense budget. That is the most efficient military expenditure in this conflict. Here's what the mainstream coverage is missing. The question isn't what Iran destroyed. The question is what Iran proved about the execution gap. For decades, Western military planners have operated on an assumption. The assumption was that even if an adversary could theoretically develop a hypersonic weapon, they couldn't actually field it in combat. The technical challenges were too great. The guidance systems were too complex. The targeting intelligence was too difficult. Iran just closed that execution gap. The Fattah-2 requires technology that only a handful of countries have mastered. Hypersonic glide vehicles must endure skin temperatures exceeding 2,000 degrees Celsius. They require composite materials that don't crack under extreme stress. They need ablation-resistant coatings that maintain stability despite erosion. They demand inertial guidance systems accurate enough to hit a specific bunker after a 1,400-kilometer flight at Mach 15. Iran has all of this, and they demonstrated it in combat. China and North Korea have been watching. North Korea began testing hypersonic glide vehicles in September 2021. The Hwasong-16B entered service in 2024. The message from Tehran to Beijing and Pyongyang was clear. Hypersonic weapons work. They penetrate Western defenses. They hit hardened targets. They kill senior commanders. The execution gap is closed. And every American military planner is now recalculating the vulnerability of their own command centers. Most people watching coverage of this war are watching the military scoreboard. Missiles fired, targets hit, casualties inflicted. But there's another scoreboard. It's updated in defense ministries in Tel Aviv, Washington, and London. It doesn't use the word victory. It uses words like vulnerability, and asymmetry and cost exchange ratio. On that scoreboard, something fundamental just shifted. The Fattah-2 strike didn't just kill 7 generals, it demonstrated that Israel's most expensive defensive systems, the Arrow, David's Sling, and Iron Dome, are irrelevant against this class of weapon. It demonstrated that Iran can strike any target in Israel with impunity. The 1 to 400 kilometer range of the Fattah-2 covers every major Israeli city and military installation. It demonstrated that the laws of physics, the Mach 30 interceptor problem, cannot be legislated or budgeted away. You cannot spend your way out of a hypersonic threat. You can only accept the vulnerability or destroy the launchers before they fire. Here's the trap that Israel is now facing, and I need you to sit with this because it explains everything. If Israel tries to destroy Iran's Fattah-2 launchers preemptively, they risk escalating the war into a full regional conflict. If they don't destroy the launchers, every command center, every air base, every strategic facility is a potential target for a weapon they cannot stop. Neither option restores the pre-strike assumption of safety. The assumption that Israel's underground bunkers were secure is gone. The assumption that Iran couldn't close the execution gap is gone. The assumption that American air defense systems could protect Israel from any threat is gone. Iran spent $5 million to put a question mark over every hardened military installation in Israel, and question marks are harder to kill than missiles. Here's what makes this harder to talk about than it should be. Israel cannot publicly acknowledge the full implication of what happened, because admitting that hypersonic weapons have made their command centers vulnerable invites more attacks than it prevents. So the official statement becomes, an incident occurred. Not because the people saying it believe it, but because the alternative, telling the Israeli public that 7 generals were killed by a weapon their air defense systems cannot stop, creates a psychological crisis that has no clean resolution. The silence is not a cover-up. The silence is a choice between bad options, and Israel chose the one that buys time. The Fattah-2 strike on March 1st, 2026 will be studied in military academies for decades, not because of the casualties, because of what it proved. It proved that hypersonic weapons are not theoretical. They are operational, they are accurate, they are unstoppable. And the country that fields them first can strike at the heart of an adversary's command structure with impunity. Iran just demonstrated that capability. The question is not whether other countries will follow. The question is who will be the next target. Here's my question for you in the comments. Should Israel try to destroy Iran's Fattah-2 launchers preemptively, even if it means escalating the war? Or should they accept that their hardened command centers are now vulnerable and restructure their military command accordingly? I read every comment. The best ones I'll address in a follow-up. All sources are linked in the description. Military Watch Magazine, Caliber Diaz, and Abana confirm the strike details, casualty figures, and technical specifications of the Fattah-2. If you made it this far, you understand that the next war won't be won by the side with the best defenses. It will be won by the side with the weapons that make those defenses obsolete. This is War Conflict. I'll see you in the next one.